I had always considered my neighborhood quiet, maybe too quiet. Lawns were meticulously mowed, fences perfectly painted, and everyone smiled a little too much for my liking. But I never minded. I liked order. I liked peace. My house, a cozy brick bungalow at the end of the cul-de-sac, felt like the one place where I could breathe. That peace shattered one Tuesday afternoon. It started with a loud, shrill banging on my front door. I was sitting at my kitchen table, laptop open, catching up on work, when a voice shouted through the glass, "Open up! This is HOA business." I frowned. I wasn't in the HOA, never had been, never would. Curiosity turned to irritation as the door rattled under another series of bangs. I peeked through the peephole and saw a young man, maybe 19, sweating under the hot sun, looking half panicked, half angry. Behind him, standing like a sentinel, was a middle-aged woman with her arms crossed, glaring at me with a mix of authority and entitlement that screamed HOA president. I opened the door cautiously. "Can I help you?" My son broke in. The woman barked before I could even respond. "And now I'm calling the cops. You can't just ignore HOA rules." I blinked. "Excuse me, your son broke in?" "Yes," she snapped. "He tripped your front gate, went into your backyard. And well, you know how these things go. I run this HOA, and my word is law." I stared at her son, who now looked sheepish, shuffling his feet. "Mom, I didn't mean," he started, but she cut him off with a sharp glare. "This is serious. He needs to be accountable." My annoyance boiled into disbelief. The audacity of claiming HOA authority over someone who wasn't even a member? Incredible. I motioned for them to step aside. "All right, let's slow down. No one's been hurt. Why don't you explain what happened calmly?" But calm wasn't in her vocabulary. She screamed about regulations, trespassing, fines, and community integrity, while her son avoided eye contact, looking more embarrassed by the second. I sighed, realizing there was no reasoning with her, and then came the most ridiculous part. She pulled out her phone. "I'm calling the cops. They'll make sure your property is safe from, well, my son, technically." I raised an eyebrow. "Wait, he's the intruder. Why are you calling the cops on me?" Her lips curled in a superior smirk. "Because my HOA is bigger than your house? I make the rules here, that was it. I had had enough." But I didn't want to escalate things. Instead, I calmly invited them to wait for the police outside. Little did she know, karma was already on the way. Within 20 minutes, flashing lights appeared down the street. A single patrol car rolled to a stop in front of my house. I walked outside to meet the officer, a tall man with sharp eyes and a calm demeanor. "Good afternoon," he said. "We got a call about a possible trespassing incident." I gestured toward the woman and her son. "This is the situation. Her son forced his way in, and now she's claiming HOA authority over me. Someone who isn't even in the HOA." The officer raised an eyebrow and turned toward the mother. "Ma'am, can you explain exactly what happened?" Her story came out in a chaotic jumble of half-truths and exaggerations. She insisted her son had been checking on community safety, and that I was somehow violating HOA standards by not supervising my own property. The young man tried to back up her story, but his voice cracked under the pressure. After 20 minutes of listening, the officer sighed. "Ma'am, you do realize HOA rules do not grant you law enforcement authority, correct?" Her face turned red, and for a brief moment, I thought I might see her explode. But instead, she said, I mean, I thought. I couldn't help a small grin. The officer raised his hand. "Sir," he said to me, "did your property sustain any damage?" I shook my head. Just a little scuff on the gate. "Then here's how this works," the officer continued. "Your son is facing charges for trespassing, and your claims of HOA authority don't override criminal law." The mother gasped. "But I'm the HOA president. I make the rules." The officer looked at her like she had suggested the sun revolves around her backyard. "Not in criminal law. Ma'am, not in criminal law." At that point, the son quietly muttered, "I guess I'm going to jail, huh?" And just like that, the tables had turned. Her entitlement, her insistence on authority, Her inability to see reality meant that her son was now the one being held accountable. There was nothing she could do about it. The mother stormed out of my yard, leaving her son handcuffed and escorted into the patrol car. I couldn't help but feel a strange satisfaction as she shrieked about injustice and tyranny from the sidewalk. Neighbors peered from windows, some whispering, others recording on their phones. By the time the police left, the story of her overreach had already begun spreading. I spent the rest of the afternoon securing my property and talking with neighbors who approached, curious and incredulous. "Did you see that?" one said. "She actually thought HOA rules could put someone in jail?" I laughed, shaking my head. Apparently, some people just don't understand the difference between authority and entitlement. Later that evening, I received a call from the local HOA board, not hers, but the legitimate one. They had heard about the incident and wanted to make sure there was no misunderstanding. I explained everything, leaving out only the most embarrassing details for her. They assured me that everything was under control and that no HOA fines could ever apply to me. I hung up, feeling a sense of calm returning to the neighborhood. The absurdity of what happened didn't diminish, but at least justice had been served. Weeks later, I received an official notice. The son had been formally charged with trespassing and minor property damage. He would face a court hearing, and depending on the judge, sometime in a juvenile facility. The mother, meanwhile, had become the subject of online ridicule in local forums and social media groups. Videos of her yelling about HOA rules went viral in our small town. I didn't gloat, not outwardly. I kept living my quiet life, tending to my garden, reading, and enjoying the rare quiet that remained. But every time I passed her house, I couldn't help a small, knowing smile. Entitlement, no matter how loud, couldn't beat reality. A few months later, I heard through mutual neighbors that she had tried to claim HOA authority elsewhere, only to be laughed out of board meetings. Her son, now wiser and considerably more humble, had learned a lesson he would never forget. And me had learned something to sometimes. The best justice is simply letting the system work, letting the truth shine through, and watching karma do the heavy lifting. The neighborhood returned to its quiet rhythm, fences freshly painted, lawns neatly trimmed. But the story of HOA Karen and her son became legend. A cautionary tale about the limits of authority, the dangers of entitlement, and the swift consequences of breaking the law. Because in the end, no HOA rule, no matter how loudly proclaimed, outrun justice. This story is just the beginning. There is so much more ahead. Subscribe to the channel to join me on this journey,